Hi, good morning, everyone. We have Adam Beck here. Adam and I have actually known each other for many years, both from Hiroshima. And this focus of this series is on sustainability. And what better way to make social equity or quality of life than to be able to talk across languages and across cultures? So, raising bilingual kids in Japan or wherever you are in the world is, of course, a very important part of a sustainable future. So thank you so much, Adam, for joining us today.
My pleasure, Joy. Nice to be here.
It's so awesome. And even though we've known each other for years, I really enjoyed researching about you and looking at all of your websites and
Uh-oh.
everything. And of course, learning new things. So I wanted to start by asking you about your growing up in America in the hometown of Mark Twain. Is that right?
Well, actually, I grew up, my hometown is Quincy, Illinois, which is across the river
Okay.
from Mark Twain's hometown of Hannibal, Missouri. So it's very close, but the influence pervades the whole area because there's the Mark Twain Diner and the Mark Twain Hotel and all that sort of good stuff. But it really is an interesting place, though, beneath that in terms of the history. And there's the Mark Twain Cave, which actually is the cave where he played in as a boy, which plays an important part in the Adventures of Tom Sawyer, if you know that book. So that's where I grew up, right by the mighty Mississippi River.
Wow. I mean, as an author, as someone who went into publishing books, that's a pretty great place to grow up, right? That kind of inspiration.
Well, I don't know. It's a little bit small for me. I think there
Yeah.
are many great things about it, and I always enjoy visiting when I have that opportunity, and I still have close friends there. But, I left after high school and I went to New York and then I went out to San Francisco. So I I have I guess it's the best of both that I enjoy because I do like a larger city, but not too large. And I think I've settled into Hiroshima and I've been here for many years now. And it kind of has the best of both because it is a large city, but there's a lot of beautiful nature here and you feel you can get out into the countryside very quickly too.
Yeah. Great. Also, when you were growing up, you also delivered pizza, made donuts, and you were a theater guy. So you did a lot of drama. You ended up teaching drama as well to kids, right? So,
Yes. Yeah, my background, well, have a checkered background. I've done many different things and they've all been interesting in their own ways. But I think as I tell my kids actually about work in the future, it's a good thing to do things that you might not necessarily enjoy because you figure out what you really do enjoy through that process of elimination, even if it might take longer that way. But yes, theater was a very important part of my past and informs, the creative work I do even today if I'm making a video or things like that. So even if I don't do a lot of theater actively, I did it for a very long time, especially a lot of theater with kids, writing and directing and even performing. So yeah, it's I have very fond memories of the theater that I did.
that's great. I was talking with Hinako Arao. She is a peace and climate change activist in Japan, and she actually spent some time in the States doing theater. And she talks about how it really gave her confidence to then come back and be an activist and talk to people about climate
Mhm.
change and stuff. So it's
I
such a
see.
great way to get people talking and to be more confident about communicating. So, what a
Yeah.
great background for you.
I agree. I mean, I think that's all true, and I think that's very true with kids. And it was a big part of my work with kids is empowering them in that way. I think because if a child or anyone can get on a stage and in front of people, which tends to be one of the higher fears, right, in terms of public speaking, many people don't. You know, death seems the better option for some people. But anyway, yes, absolutely. Being in front of people and feeling confident and sharing something that's meaningful to other people. I think it can be a life-changing experience, particularly for kids who are still in their formative years.
Yeah. I mean, when I first came to Japan, I was really surprised how people seemed so shy in the classroom. But then at the school event, they would get up on stage and sing karaoke in front of everyone. It's like,
Right.
wow, how do you have that confidence? That's
That's
awesome.
true. I think that context of karaoke is something that the Japanese grow up with, and maybe within that context, they're able to be a bit more bold. But beyond that, well, I don't know. I guess it depends on the person and the situation.
Yeah. Let's start by introducing some of your books, if you don't mind. You've got so many books that you've written. On the screen right now, I'm showing people your social media. They can find you on Twitter. You've actually got two accounts, Bilingual Adventures and Bilingual Monkeys.
That's
On
true.
Facebook, Bilingual Monkeys. On YouTube, Bilingual Monkeys, and Amazon Japan, Amazon US, and Bilingual Zoo. Where
Right.
you're
Actually, there's
quite
two new
busy.
there's two Instagram accounts now
Okay.
too that started up, I don't know, a month ago. And one is Bilingual Adventures. The other is related to bearded dragons because we have a pet bearded dragon, and that is now a big part of our lives as a family. But in fact, that led to one of the most recent books I created with my son about a bearded dragon. It's a bearded dragon coloring book. So anyway, we made an Instagram, which is really taking off because we're doing some fun things there. So it's called Bearded Dragon Daydreams. Actually, it's the same title as the book itself. Um, so whether or not you like bearded dragons, they're adorable creatures. Believe me, you can stop by our house and play with ours. But it's a really cute coloring book, and I think you'd enjoy our Instagram. So stop by Bearded Dragon Daydreams at Instagram.
Nice. And can you introduce the Bearded Dragons coloring book a little bit?
Yeah, sure. Actually, I mean, I suppose we could say there are, various silver linings in this very difficult year. One silver lining for my family, probably for many families, has been the fact that the parents and children are able to spend more time together. And I think that's really important for me this year because my kids are older now, 16, 13. And I'm sure you can empathize with this, Joy, but they lead more independent lives, they become much busier, and I really don't have much time with them compared to the past when we were spending a lot more time together and I had a lot more influence over their lives. But they were home for almost 3 months, and during that time, we really could spend a lot of time together because I do work from home. And during that time, my son and I, we had that idea for this. Oh, it would be funny, this bearded dragon coloring book, uh, uh, which is called Bearded Dragon Daydreams. And the idea, the concept is that, bearded dragons are not the most expressive creatures. They're really, really calm and friendly, but they're not terribly lively. They can be, but they often just sit there basking on their rock with kind of a stony expression on their face. And we thought, wouldn't it be fun if there was a coloring book which showed what the bearded dragon was daydreaming about? So you had this contrast between his very impassive little face and his daydreams like riding on a roller coaster. And so we came up with these ideas, but it wasn't the kind of idea that you probably would pursue in real life because real life takes over and you don't have time. But during those 3 months we had time, and I picked it up and I said, let's do this together. And so we did. We brought in an illustrator to bring the ideas to life, and now it's out there in the world. And particularly the people who are bearded dragon fans are really responding to it now. So it was a really great project for my son and I, and continues to be because we're working on another book together. This one is a cat dreams coloring book, but it's also now, it's now out in the world and it's touching many other people too.
That's awesome. Yeah, it's so fun. And coloring, especially as your kids get older, they have a lot of homework to do. coloring can be kind of a way to get together with your kids and do something together and have that opportunity to talk just by doing that together.
Well, sure. Yeah. I mean, in our case, it wasn't the actual coloring, but it was the actual developing the ideas and working with the illustrator. And we were able to do that. I mean, we'll probably tie things back to bilingualism throughout this conversation. But, one of the perks or one of the real benefits of this process was the fact that we were using English, which is our minority language in Japan, to work on this project together. So many different benefits from this, and the book itself turned out really nicely. So it's very exciting.
That's great. Just to backtrack a little bit, let's talk about your website, because you've got not just your books, but your website has so much free information available to people. You've got this best tips for raising bilingual kids that is free to download. You've got a lot of infographics as well. Can you give us some of your best tips? Just choose a few. There's so many. There's like 50, but choose one or
Well,
two.
yes. I mean, well, first of all, let me just offer a little bit of context that the blog itself, the Bilingual Monkeys blog, is now 8 years old or almost 8 years old. And in fact, it's going through a renewal process now, and probably next month or so, very soon, there'll be a new website. It'll be, largely the same sort of content, but it will have a shiny new face, I guess. But anyway, so the blog has been with me since my daughter's 16, so since she was 8 and my son was 5. And I was very active in terms of blogging as they were growing up because I was so involved. I had so much time with them. And I wanted to spend time with them, not only as a father, but to provide them with the English exposure they needed. So that's what the blog has been. It's really been the cornerstone, I guess, of all the work I've done, and people have really responded to it. And everything else has kind of spun off of that over the years. But in terms of tips, I mean, it all comes down in a very simple way to two things, two core conditions, I say. Number one, I just mentioned this, but exposure. Children need exposure to the target language. They need ample exposure. And if there isn't enough exposure, particularly compared to the majority language, then it can be very hard for the child to use that language more actively. They may gain some passive understanding, which is also quite an accomplishment because that can be activated eventually. But in order to foster active ability in a target language, the child needs ample exposure to that language. And that's universal. I mean, there aren't many things that are universal, I think, among bilingual and multilingual families because the circumstances are also uniquely different, obviously. However, exposure is universal. If there is not enough of that, then the child simply won't have enough input in their little brain to be able to generate enough ability and enough confidence to use it actively. And at the same time, number two, in terms of these core conditions, would be need. So there's exposure, and there's also need in most cases where the child needs a genuine need to use the language. If they know that the parent, let's say the minority language parent, also has ability in the majority language and is willing to use that very liberally, the child may not feel an organic need, a genuine need to actually use the minority language, even if they have some ability in it, because children are pragmatic and if they don't need to use that other language, then they'll use the language that they feel is stronger and they feel more comfortable using, and that's only natural. So that's not always true because there are some families where the child is aware of the parent's ability in the majority language, and yet the relationship, it seems in many cases that the relationship from an early age has been fostered in the minority language. And so they have developed an emotional bond in that language, which helps to sustain the active use of the language, even though the parent or parents have ability in the majority language. So I hope that I'm more or less making sense, but it's those two core conditions which, if they are effectively addressed from as early as possible, can lead to a great deal of rewarding success, progress, and long-term success over the years of childhood.
Yeah, that's great. I know it's a huge topic. It's not easy to just summarize quickly. So thank you for
Right.
trying. I mean, it's just so many variables. But like you said, you've recently started doing consulting, because it's really important to hear each individual case, family's case, and then to give advice about how they could improve or how they could progress. Do you want to?
Exactly. Exactly. Because, I can offer general advice and I always point back to these two core conditions because everything traces itself back to that. And so when I'm consulting with parents, I'm looking at those two main conditions. Is there ample exposure? How can that exposure be increased in effective ways? And is there an organic need, a genuine need for the child to actually use that language actively? Because again, everything goes back to that. And so my conversations with parents, I think, are interesting in that they're very specific because they're really geared towards the particular circumstances and needs of that family. And yet they also go back to this larger idea of exposure and need. So I think in a way it's easy to talk about in a simple way, okay, exposure and need. But what does that actually mean when it comes to a real family with a real lifestyle and real circumstances that they may be struggling with? Because for some families, the circumstances are really working against their bilingual aim, right? So that's the longer conversation. And that's where consulting, the consulting work that I do with families, um, these are in-depth conversations related to the simple idea of exposure and need, but it gets really into um, the the real specifics of how to fortify, how to strengthen these two core conditions of exposure and need. So I've been doing consulting for a long time now, but recently um, I feel very fortunate actually because I'm now working with a group called HableNet in Europe, and they wanted to offer free consulting, which I would have loved to do in the past, but I wasn't able to do it for free. But they are covering the fee for my consulting for parents, and so I've been blessed to be consulting with many more parents over the past 2, 3 months, and it's really one of the great joys for me.
And if people wanted to find out about your consulting, they can link through the Bilingual Zoo. Is that right?
Yeah, I think if people go to my forum, the Bilingual Zoo, they'll find a thread about this pretty easily. If they can't find it, I think you will. But if you can't find it, you could always email me directly through Bilingual Monkeys to find out more about it. But there is a thread about this at the Bilingual Zoo Forum. So please take a peek. And if you'd like to talk to me personally, I'd be really happy to talk to you and offer some support for your bilingual or your multilingual journey with your kids.
Let's talk about the Bilingual Zoo a little bit because it's a very active forum that you've been doing for a long time. And
Right.
it seems like one of the most popular threads is about tracking your progress. You've got over 4,000 posts in that one section.
Right.
So is that, can you introduce that? How does that work?
Well, the Bilingual Zoo, so Bilingual Monkeys is the blog, right? And that started 2012. And so because the Bilingual Zoo started to grow and there was an audience there was a growing audience, and they wanted an opportunity to interact more with each other too. And so I thought, okay, well, how do I do that? I was busy enough. I'm always too busy, but anyway, I thought, okay, maybe I can open a forum. And okay, well, I did. And it really took off from there. That was 2014. So it's been almost 6 years now that the forum has been there, and there's well over 1,000 members. They're not all active or active at the same time, but there are a lot of active members. And one of the most active boards, as you mentioned, Joy, is Track Your Progress. And this is an opportunity, and the forum is free. Anyone can read it, anyone can join it in order to post on it. If you become a member, it's free to become a member, and then you can actually post. But even if you don't, go through the membership process, which is very simple, then the whole site is open and the content is free. But Track Your Progress is an opportunity for parents to start their own thread about their, family's journey. And it's an opportunity to write about your journey on a fairly regular basis if you wish, which I encourage, because that really can help fuel a parent's efforts, mindfulness and efforts over time. Like anything, especially any long-term aim, if we're keeping it in the forefront of our mind, and one of the best ways to do that is by writing about it regularly, whatever it is, and however you write about it, even if it's only in a journal for yourself. But if you have like a forum thread, that's your thread that you're updating every 2 weeks or even every month, let's say, but you're updating it on a fairly regular basis, you're not only observing your own journey and your own efforts, but you're sharing in a way that makes you accountable to yourself. You're really reinforcing your own accountability for what you say, at least what you claim is your goal, which is to raise a bilingual or multilingual child. And so there's a real benefit in that. And then beyond that, there's the whole community, which includes me, and I try to be as active as I can in terms of offering support to anyone who asks for it. So it's hard to stay, it's hard to keep up with everything sometimes, but I really do my best. And even though I haven't met, I've only met a small percentage of the people that, I've met virtually over the years. And I'm really happy that I have been able to meet people in person and even virtually through Skype, for example. But even through something like the forum, I've really developed some real kinships with these parents and these families, and I really care about them, and I want them to succeed. I want every family who has this bilingual or multilingual aim to succeed, because I understand very personally how important this aim is, particularly if it's really directly connected to your family's heritage and your connections to your extended family.
Yeah, that's great. And of course, it kind of connects to your trip last year when you traveled around, stayed with families, and talked with them face to face. It's great that you did that last year because it's not possible to do that kind
Yeah,
of trip this year. Do you want to tell us a
yeah.
little bit about your trip? That sounds amazing.
Yeah, I was very fortunate. Again, all this has grown over time. So it's not like I started one day with all these different ideas and projects and different places of presence on the web and stuff. It just kind of unfolds over time if you keep at it, right? And so one thing, and this is really directly related to the bilingual zoo, is after, my first book is called Maximize Your Child's Bilingual Ability, and this came out about 4 years ago. Is that right? And because of this book is really based on my experience as a teacher and a parent of bilingual and multilingual kids. And I tried to bring this together in a book that would be very practical for other parents. And so it talks about my story, using my story as examples for these larger ideas related to the most practical and I think empowering ways possible to think about this goal, and also to make efforts toward realizing this goal from day to day, right? So through as a result of this book, I started thinking about, and through the blog, and especially through the forum, because I started hearing more and more stories from other parents who are raising their own children in places all over the world. And I started thinking, this would be such a great book if I can bring together a collection of stories of other parents, other families. And I thought, okay, well, how do I do this? It's great to have great ideas, or you think they're great ideas. And then it's another thing, just like the forum, when I was like, okay, well, now what? How do you actually actualize these things? And there are many things that I never really pursue for one reason or another. But I felt like the timing was right for this. And I had the opportunity to do this because I didn't know through the blog and the forum, I had gotten to know many, many families out there in the world. And so last fall, in September, in September, I can't talk, I'm a frog. And
Oh, sorry.
fill in for me, Joy.
You
In.
okay? Are you okay? Okay.
No, I'm fine. I'm good.
Okay.
So in last September and October, I went to Europe and I went to 9 countries. I had short homestays with 10 families over the course of almost 6 weeks, I think. And I interviewed the parents for their stories. And it's not only the stories of the families I was able to meet and interact with in person at that time, but I've actually been able to meet some families here in Japan. I've met families when I was, overseas before this project took shape. And then I've been able to reconnect with families and also connect with other families, other parents through Skype and through Zoom like that. So I brought together these stories and I'm writing the book now. And it will end up having about 25 stories, I think, of families in all different sorts of circumstances with younger kids, older kids in this part of the world, in that part of the world. And it's a big project and it's taking even longer than I expected. I knew it would take a long time, but it's taking even longer than I expected because I'm also juggling these other things at the same time. But my hope is that this book of other families' bilingual and multilingual stories about their journeys will come out early next year. So that's one of the main things I'm working on now. But it's been such a fascinating process because hand in hand with the consulting work, actually, because in that case too, I'm really exploring what makes a family successful? What that's the key question, right? What makes a family successful, at least on their own terms, because everyone defines success in different ways. But what makes a family successful in terms of their mindset, in terms of their actions each day, in terms of the qualities that they bring to this challenge over time, because it's a long-term process. It's a marathon, it's not a sprint. And all those things are, really, really relevant. And through this process of getting to know these other families, it's a very rewarding, it's very gratifying for me to be a part of that personally, but then to be able to share it with others beyond that, through a book or through the blog or through the forum or through other ways, then it touches even more families, right? So it ripples out into the world and everyone can benefit. And that's the sustainability, I guess, of creating a more bilingual and multilingual world.
That's awesome. Let me give you a break a little bit, have a little drink, and I'll introduce your 9 bilingual myths. One of the things that I love, and I think a lot of people love about your publications and websites, is that you are so funny.
The humor, I want humor to be a part of it. Absolutely.
You have a great sense of humor. So myth number, I mean, in Japan, you always hear from people, and this must have been the inspiration for making lists like this. You always hear from people that they can't raise their kids bilingual, that having two languages makes their first language or their mother tongue weaker, right? That's
Right.
often the stereotype that I've heard many times. I'm sure you have as well.
Sure.
Yeah, so babies that are exposed to more than one language develop more complex cases of diaper rash is number that's number one. And
Right, right.
another one is you can't be a dentist. You'll have to drop out of dental school or something. I mean, it's so funny. It's so cute.
Well, I've had a lot of fun. I continue to have fun trying to approach the work that I do, even very serious things from a humorous angle because, you can actually say quite a lot through humor. You can convey these important messages in humorous ways. And sometimes, yes, it's really just to be lighter and whimsical. But, in this area, I think one of the things that at least I hope, is refreshing about the work that I'm doing is that work in bilingualism, multilingualism, a lot of it's very academic and a lot of it has a lot of value. I'm not suggesting it doesn't, but it can be very dry. And what I want the work, because it's more fun for me, first of all. And if the work is more fun for me, then hopefully it will be more fun for others to digest even these more serious or more difficult ideas, right? And so, anyway, that's who I am as a person. And whatever I'm doing, whether it's something more serious related to raising bilingual children, or whether it's the stuff which I consider lighter anyway, like the Bearded Dragon Daydreams coloring book. I mean, I want to approach it with a sense of playfulness and humor because, again, that's who I am. But I think people respond to that because we're all playful at heart, I think, right?
Yeah. And if you go on the Bilingual Monkeys website, you can see all these amazing illustration infographics that you made, which you can share on Pinterest, and you can grab the code and put it on your own website as well. I love your illustrations. Who are you working with? A lot of different illustrators?
I have over the years, that's true. So um, I can do, a lot of the graphic design work. I've done that, but I don't do the illustration work itself. And so um, over the years, for example, the monkeys at the Bilingual Monkeys website and the Bilingual Zoo Forum, I've worked with an illustrator who also did this book for me, which is a more simple book that actually uses humor. It's the baby's voice talking about, I want to be bilingual, and giving advice to the parents about how to do that. And so I use the same illustrator for this book. In fact, today is the first anniversary of this book. So good timing. But
That's
it,
nice.
it turned out it's really cute. I'm really happy with it. And it's very different in a way from the bigger Maximize Your Child's Bilingual Ability, which is, over 300 pages. And this other book is 44 pages, which really tries to condense the same very essential ideas in a more humorous way, but still convey those ideas maybe for someone who doesn't really want to read a 300-page book, but they're happy to look at more of a picture book, which still has the same sort of messages, important messages for parents to grasp in order to be more successful at their bilingual aim.
Yeah. We had a comment from Molly B on Periscope. Thank you, Molly. My grandma spoke a Seneca Indian language and refused to learn English. I learned the language from her so I could communicate better with her. Ends up
Right.
only about 300 of us speak it, so now I teach it to Seneca children. That's awesome.
That's so fantastic. And I mean, I think that underscores the point about need because to communicate with her, this was the grandmother,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
communicate with her grandmother, she needed some ability in this language. And so if we have that need organically, great, but sometimes we have to reshape our conditions in certain ways to fortify that need for the child. So I'm very happy with her situation and how it turned out, and that she's able to, hand this down to other children as well. We can pass this down for generations if we have that much foresight about how we're spending our days now.
Yeah, one of the recent collaborations I also came across was you're doing with Chocolate Sushi Roll. She's raising kids in Japan, and they have a military family, and they're doing three languages as well. So it's really incredible to hear. You must hear so many stories from families all over the world in so many different situations, right?
Exactly. It's really wonderful, and to have, again, I sometimes I feel too busy. I already mentioned that, and I need to control my own time. I need to continue. It's an ongoing process, probably for all of us. We all feel too busy, right? But at the same time, when I can catch my breath and I have these opportunities actually to reflect on the work that I've been doing, like in our conversation right now, I really do feel blessed to be able to have these opportunities to connect with other people, other parents, other families about their experiences, and are there ways that we can support each other, in the personal journeys that we're on and also in our professional journeys, right? And I'm always open to hearing from other people, and if there are ways that you know our lives personally or professionally can intersect, well, that's great for us both. That's great for everyone, right?
Yeah. I'm showing your one of your Zen sayings for parents raising bilingual kids right now.
Mm.
Persistent efforts add up over time.
They certainly do. And we know that in all areas of our lives, right? Particularly long term efforts. We can almost equate any long term effort to the process of raising a bilingual child. Writing a book is very much related to this. I've experienced this over and over again. And like I said, the book I'm writing now, which feels so kind of overwhelming sometimes, frankly, I just know that if I can continue working on this, even in very small bites, day by day by day, or even every other day, I'll get where I need to go incrementally. I just need to keep going. There's that old saying about how do you eat a whale, right? One bite at a time. I, let's not talk about eating whales. But
Yeah,
anyway,
let's
you
let's
understand my
not
point.
do that. Yeah.
No, no, no. Let's edit that part out.
How do you eat Goya? Because Goya is my recent challenge. I'm growing Goya as a green screen, which helps me keep my house cool. And I know it's healthy. It's the Okinawan secret. And I'm trying so hard to eat Goya. It's really bitter. But
No,
how do you eat it? One bite at
Joy's
a
the same
time.
way. Yes, yes, yes. One tiny bite at a time. I agree. It's really not the most. I'm not eager to eat it, but apparently it's quite healthy.
Yeah.
So I guess it's a summer food that we should do our best to consume.
Do our best. Gambarimasu.
Right.
Next, Zen saying, your actions matter now and for many generations. I think this goes back to what Molly B, what she's
Yes.
doing to
Yes.
preserve her grandmother's language. Beautiful.
Yeah, we just touched on this. And, in our day-to-day lives, especially, if we have children, we don't even notice how quickly they're growing up, and it's quite a remarkable thing to have a teenager and to think back, particularly, I'm connecting with many families. I spoke with a parent yesterday who has a 3-year-old and a baby who's 3 or 4 months old. And I can remember vividly when my kids were that age, but that's over a decade now, right? A decade has passed. And so another decade will pass, another decade will pass. And what we're talking about then, yes, are generations. And so, the efforts we put in day by day, and if these are long term aims, whatever they may be, if we can keep ourselves mindful and proactive and take these little bites day by day, we will make progress over time. There's always a payoff to perseverance. And for something like language, which is such an innate or such a intrinsic part, an integral part of who we are as human beings, if we're able to, if we want to, and if we're able to hand these languages down to others within our family and outside our family, then, you know, how priceless is that? How gratifying is that? And to be a part of that in my own small way, I feel very fortunate.
Yeah. And it's wonderful to make an effort to have a bilingual, multilingual home, and then to see your kids as they grow up be very comfortable with different languages and with different cultures. I'm seeing that with my kids.
Sure.
And you know how they just switch back and forth, and it's so magic and it's so easy for them, and I'm so jealous.
I know. I feel the same sort of envy. I wish I had had that opportunity from a very young age. But even I have to blame myself, not necessarily for how I was raised as a small child, but as I got older, I did have more responsibility as an older um, child, as I became a teen, when I was in college. And frankly, I did not, and I'm being kind to myself, but I did not make the most of those opportunities, and I could have. So, whatever I can do to help my children have a more productive mindset, I think, about how they're approaching their own challenges or their own opportunities in their lives, if they can make the most of their opportunities, and that's true not just of my kids, but again, when I'm talking to other families, the message is always the same, make the most of this time that you have. But that's true of our personal lives as well, isn't it?
Yeah.
We all want to live in a way that um, feels authentic, that feels productive, that feels fulfilling in some way. And I think so much of that comes back to making the most of each day that we have. And also trying to, at the same time, strike a balance between what is possible for us to do, and the things we're not able to do, as I said before, that's okay too. But we do what we can day by day, and we approach those possibilities with a full heart and a full spirit.
I think this next comment from Molly B feeds right into that. There's been a big move within many Indian nations to reclaim their language. We see this. I grew up in Hawaii. Now there's immersion schools in Hawaii where kids can go to school. Everything from start to finish is done in Hawaiian, trying to keep the language alive.
Right.
And you must have other examples. People, our kids in Japan, they go to Japanese school, they speak Japanese at school, they come home, they speak English. So having a bilingual household and having authentic places where they can speak in a real way, not just practice, seems
Yes,
very, very key.
exactly. I think that, that point about that movement, let's say, of less common languages, heritage languages. I spoke to a family the other day in Ireland, and the language is Gaelic, if I'm pronouncing that right. That is now a very small part of the society, and yet there is movement towards bringing the language back, and having that language be part of schooling, and so forth. And so I think in many parts of the world, people are trying to maintain these heritage languages, and it can be very challenging. But if these are important to people, um, I think we should support that, and I certainly do.
One of the things you said in your Japan Times interview years ago was that raising bilingual kids can often be lonely. If parents are successful at nurturing two languages, this can have a huge impact on the family far into the future, even generations, which we just talked about. A lot
Right.
of people feel lonely in their bilingual journey and aren't sure where to turn for support. So hopefully my site can help them continue moving forward.
Right, right. I think it's true. Again, it's it can be very, it really depends on the family and the parent. But there are, I know, many parents out there in the world who are, they have their minority language. They grew up with that language in their country. They end up in another country, and the majority language, the community language surrounds them. Their spouse, their partner does not have any ability in their language, and they feel quite alone in their efforts to hand down that language to their child or their children. And that's where, the magnificent side of the internet is that people in those circumstances are able to connect with others and feel more encouragement, to feel that they're part of a community, that they're not alone, and that if they need any sort of support, that there's a lifeline for them, right? That they don't have to feel alone. Yes, it's true. I mean, for many of us that we're alone in the sense that we have to take responsibility for this. This is our aim, and these are our efforts. And yet, very often, particularly for something that's a larger long-term goal, we do need some cheerleaders, at least saying, you can do this. You can keep going for another day. Yes, you had a bad day. Yes, this child is not responding to you in the language that you would prefer, but you can keep going. And if you keep going, that's the key. If you keep going, you will experience some progress, some ongoing improvement over time, as long as you keep going, because again, there's always a payoff to perseverance in any of these larger long-term aims. So, I mean, that's finally, at the end of the day, that's the thing to say, and that's maybe the only thing to say, is that perseverance is the key. You just have to keep going. And if you do, you will experience growing progress, growing success over time.
Yeah. And I think on the flip side, don't you think having a bilingual household helps a bilingual family feel less lonely? I've heard from certain parents who say they were told by the other parent or the grandparents not to speak their native language with their kids, and
Yeah.
so they raise kids speaking always a second language, never speaking their mother tongue with their own children because of pressure from the outside. And how lonely an experience that is, never to be able to communicate in your native tongue with your language. And
Mm,
I always feel so sad for them, because what a benefit to the kids if the kids had been able to communicate with their mother in her native language. It's so much more
yeah.
warmth and everything in that
Yeah. It's
communication,
a
right?
it's a it's a very good point. I mean, all this depends on the family in terms of what they feel is, best for themselves. But when there are roadblocks towards handing down a language from, you know, extended family members, whether it might be grandparents or even a doctor who's offering misguided advice or things like that, that can make life even more challenging. I mean, it can be challenging itself, the process itself can be quite challenging if the circumstances are working against the particular family. And there are many things involved. But anyway, it can be challenging anyway. And then to have someone telling you, oh, you shouldn't be doing that. You shouldn't be doing it that way. That can really undermine one's enthusiasm and one's efforts, right? So I have a very soft spot for those parents, and I really want to support those parents because those parents in particular need support.
Yeah, I think so too. And I always tell them to break the rules, to sneak it in, to speak in their own language. I mean, that's a human right, you
Yeah,
know? And
true.
the kids are just little sponges, and they can absorb it very naturally and switch between languages. It's often a misconception that children will be confused if you have too many languages, right?
Right, I agree. There is no confusion. I mean, those early years are, as you just mentioned, are particularly important, I think. The early formative years, because so much can be done. Their brains are primed for language learning at that time. And it's not to say that we can't learn languages. Children can't learn languages well when they're older or even as adults. Of course, that's true. However, it is also true that small children are particularly primed to learn language. And so, if we can make the most of nature itself, we give our very best. Again, we make the most of our days and our early years with our children. We're actually working with nature, and I think that's the most productive way forward, to start as early as possible and to be as proactive as possible, day by day.
Yeah, Molly says, I was never allowed to speak Seneca around my parents. They rejected the language. I always thought it was such a loss for them, like a piece of who they were was gone. And
Uh,
I've heard this
yes,
story so many times.
sure. Yeah, I feel for that. I mean, I understand it. It's unfortunate. It happens. Um, Obviously, we can't control every aspect of life and other people's lives, but we can do the best with our own life. And if we do have certain aims, we should definitely not let others hinder our efforts um, towards achieving those aims, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So we've got about 8 minutes left.
Sure.
I'm showing your 10 things I love about bilingual kids infographic now, and 11 things you'll run into with little trouble raising bilingual kids.
Oh,
Those are really cute ones. You can see these infographics and share, of course, on the website, Bilingual Monkeys, as
you
well.
can actually, yeah, in the Bilingual Zoo, they were first posted at Bilingual Monkeys, but then I kind of collected them and I put them at the Bilingual Zoo. So if you search for the memes I made or the infographics I made, I mean, I did try to make little collections. And if you do a little bit of digging at the Bilingual Zoo, I think under the announcements board, then you can find them, all together there.
Okay,
Um,
great.
yeah, yeah.
Anything else we haven't touched on you'd like to talk about?
Well, I think
Oh, the
we
Spanish
mentioned,
book, your new
yeah,
book.
yeah, there's a couple things I could mention quickly. Um, Actually, there's two other books, but I did write a novel. It's called How I Lost My Ear. And Joy, I know you read this.
Yeah, it's great.
But I really, really enjoyed writing this. It really does connect to my, theater background and creative writing background. And it was illustrated actually last fall when I was in Europe. I was in England, and I had a chance to meet the illustrator, and we worked together for a whole year. He created something like 140 illustrations for this book. And I had a chance last fall to meet him in person. What a thrill that was to finally sit down and we had lunch together. But it's a really fun book. And if you enjoy humorous fiction, then I think you'd really enjoy it. So take a peek.
Yeah.
And the other thing, the newest book is called 28 Bilingual English, Spanish, Fairy Tales, and Fables, Short, Simple Stories for Language Learners of All Ages with Online Audio. So it's not a picture book. These are stories. The paperback has the dual facing pages. The story is in English and in Spanish. And so I wrote the English text, and a friend of mine is a translator, and a couple of friends helped with the translation.
Yeah,
And then,
I'm
uh,
showing the Three Little Pigs page in English
okay,
and Spanish right now, and the cover
yeah,
of the book.
and then I worked with a bilingual voice artist who did the audio files and people can access those online. So it's a language learning resource that can be used for children or for teens or for adults, anyone who's learning either Spanish or English or even both. And I hope it can be helpful.
Yeah, it's great. It sounds really fun. So you have the audio guide as well. So you have a native speaker reading out the book, which the kids can imitate, or how does it work?
Well, they're the audio files. So the book is paperback or ebook, and it has the text. And then you go to the link that has all the audio files. and you can listen along to the stories or just listen or listen and repeat after them. And the woman that she's a professional voice artist and she's bilingual. She grew up in the US, but she now lives in Guatemala. And so she did both the English and the Spanish versions and did a beautiful job. And so I'm really pleased. It really turned out well. And again, I hope it can be helpful to a wide range of ages.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
Yeah, great. What a nice project. And then you said you're writing a new book right now, which can you talk about, or is it top secret?
No, no. I mean, there's two things. It's the book I mentioned related to my trip, where it's a collection of the stories of bilingual and multilingual families, right? So it's sharing their stories, their experiences, and their adventures, and looking at that question, what these are success stories, right? What makes a family successful? And that book will come out sometime early next year, probably. Wish me luck. And the
Yeah,
other
good
thing I'm
luck.
working on at the moment is, again, with my son, we're working on a cat dreams coloring book because the Bearded Dragon Daydreams coloring book was really such a fun project for us and turned out so nicely that we thought, okay, well, let's move on to another project. And we're working with the same illustrator. And after we complete this, and it's almost finished, it'll probably be finished next month, we'll probably move on to something else. So my son and I now seem to have this small cottage industry of maybe not necessarily just coloring books, but we have book ideas that we're working on together, and he's a really creative kid, and the work itself is better with him. He really has a good eye and good ideas, and it's a real pleasure to be working with him on these things. He's only 13, but he has a real lively mind.
That's great. And what
Yeah,
a great father-son project. I love that. Using your
yeah.
creativity and
I
passing on to
suggest
the next generation.
that's right. And I'd really love to do something with my daughter, but that's a little bit harder. And she's 16. She's very busy anyway, but I'm not so sure that she wants to make something with her father. But we'll see, right? We'll see.
Well, I'm
There's
showing your
always
YouTube channel, Bilingual Monkeys TV, right now, and you have your son and daughter who appear in some of your videos, and lots of fun stuff there as well.
That's true. I mean, well, particularly when they were a little younger and less shy, I guess, about appearing on camera, we did a lot of fun stuff on video. And so if you'd like to see some of the short films and videos that we made together, go to the Bilingual Monkeys YouTube channel and you can see them there. But they were really fun to make. And particularly, well, they were all fun, but I think you'd enjoy the interviews because they're kind of revealing in a very silly way about who they were and I guess who I was at the time.
Yeah. So there's so much around the web. There's your books that people can get as resources, videos that people can watch. Thank you so much for everything you're doing to get
No,
content out there and to consult and get support out there as well through the forum, through your consulting work, and through your books. So thank you so much, Adam.
no, it's my pleasure. It's my pleasure to you know chat about it with you, and I'm really impressed with all the work that you're doing these days, Joy. And
Thank
I'm
you.
honored to be part of this series of conversations that you're having with so many interesting people.
It's so wonderful having such a wide variety of diverse topics, which, of course, sustainability is connected to basically everything. So, if we can find ways to improve our communication, of course, that leads to a more equitable quality of life for many of us. So, thank you so much. Yeah.
Yes, yes. Thank you too.
Charlotte says, hello, Adam. Charlotte Nakamoto.
Oh, Charlotte, hi. It's been a long time. We were
And
once neighbors, I think.
yeah, I think you were. And Molly says, thanks so much. I've learned a lot. I'm going to check out your website and YouTube. Thank you so much for your
Oh, thank
comments,
you.
Molly.
Yeah, Molly, thanks so much. Thank you. And best of luck.
Yeah, wonderful to hear about your teaching as well of the Seneca language. How exciting.
Right.
Thank you,
Right.
everybody, for joining. And please have a great weekend. Take care of yourself. And we're back next week. So take care. Bye.
Bye.